A story is going viral on Twitter. A Civil War rehearsal. The Biden administration training military to go after American citizens. That's what many people have said. The Daily Mail says a Civil War rehearsal? U.S. Army will conduct a 2-week guerrilla war training exercise in North Carolina to teach special forces how to overthrow an illegitimate government. Just weeks after the DOJ announced new domestic terrorism unit. My stars and garters, it sounds like it's happening. Cue the Ron Paul meme. No, this story is hype. Absolutely overhyped, and it's fair to say there may be something here, but I think for the most part, they're taking something that is actually commonplace training for Special Forces Green Berets and making it seem like it's tied to the notion of civil war. Now, I highlight this because I've seen a lot of people talking about it. We mentioned it briefly on Timcast IRL, and a lot of people seem to think that this Special Forces training called Robin Sage is indicative of a coming civil conflict. In this training exercise, Special Forces seek to overthrow an illegitimate government. So naturally, considering what's been going on in this country, people think it's unique. It's not. Apparently, this goes on, frequently. I don't know how far back it goes, but it goes back pretty far, this training. In fact, I have an article from, I think it's from a couple of years ago, talking about how they are conducting the exact same training. I don't think it's fair to highlight this and make it seem like this is evidence of some kind of coming civil war. However, it is interesting to see what they're training Special Forces on and what people are saying about it. So let's effectively debunk this portion of the story while then going into what I often do go into, the prospects of civil war. Right now, it seems like many on the right are saying, I should say the mainstream establishment right, that there's no chance of a civil war, and Democrats are just drumming up this fear, perhaps because they need it in order to win elections in 2022 and 2024. But I think it's fair to say that we're dealing with what may be a self-fulfilling prophecy or the reality that we are facing some kind of civil war. Again, I don't think this Civil War rehearsal is part of that story, interesting as it may be. But we're looking at a few big stories right now. First, Google search Civil War, and you'll see, I'll show you all this, story after story after story, all across the mainstream press, questioning, are we headed towards another civil war? We have a story of the DOJ creating a new domestic terror unit, which they mention in the Daily Mail article, which has people concerned. They're going to be going after more American insurgents, as they would call them. We've seen the expansion of the Capitol Police Force across the country to track down people who are viewed as extremists or in some way pertaining to January 6th. We have the January 6th Select Committee filing a subpoena against someone who was a Republican strategist who had nothing to do with January 6th, who did not work for Trump anywhere close to the time of January 6th, was not involved in any of the rallies, or was even in D.C., but for some reason, they're going after this individual. Why? Well, this person may actually be helping some of the January 6th committee politician rivals in their elections. And then we have Rachel Maddow, who's come out and said they've discovered forged documents. Republicans created forged electoral documents to try and overthrow the election. Hashtag GOP coup. And now many news organizations, namely left-wing ones, are claiming Republicans tried forging state electoral documents to cheat and steal the election. But this isn't news. We knew about this. I covered the story that Republicans, quote unquote, cast their electoral votes, even though they weren't the slated electors, sent them in because that's what happens. Democrats have objected to elections in the past several elections. And we even saw, I think it was in 1960, I think I have that pulled up, Kennedy and Nixon, Hawaii sent illegitimate electors, but they actually got chosen. The non-certified electors became the actual certified electors. So what I see here is maybe it's a Democrat desire. I don't know. But I do think we are headed towards national divorce, civil unrest, whatever you want to call it. And I feel like things are getting worse. We had that story from the Boston Globe that I mentioned over and over again, where John Podesta was part of these war games, and he actually said in their fictional scenario that the Democrats would encourage the West Coast to secede from the Union if Donald Trump won. Do you think they are going to stop? Do you think they'll give up now that 2022 is around the corner? We're expecting a red wave? I don't think so, but I don't know. This could all just be craziness, exaggeration, like this story here, a manipulation of the media and false framing. Let me break down for you what this story is and why people think this has something to do with the coming civil war, because I got to be honest, just because Operation Robin Sage, Civil War Rehearsal, has existed before doesn't mean it's not relevant, but I do think it's important to point out it's probably not relevant to what's going on. Well, it may be relevant in a certain sense, but let's read the story. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to help support my work and the work of all of our journalists. Your membership means our reporters keep working. It supports the infrastructure and the bandwidth to host all of our members-only videos. As a member, you'll get access to all of our members-only content, and we are launching new shows all the time. We've got Cast Castle Vlog, Tales from the Inverted World, Pop Culture Crisis. We're working on a new conspiracy conversational show. A lot more to come, and it's all thanks to you as members at timcast.com. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share the video in any way you can. Take the URL, post it all over the place. I've never spent any marketing on any of the videos that I've done for Timcast or Timcast IRL, and it's all thanks to you guys sharing videos that we've grown to this point. If everybody were to share this video right now, we would be bigger than CNN overnight. Here's the story from the Daily Mail. Special Forces candidates will participate in the 2-week Robin Sage training exercises in which they will practice overthrowing illegitimate governments. Young Army soldiers will be battling seasoned freedom fighters across 24 North Carolina counties in a 2-week guerrilla warfare exercise where they attempt to overthrow an illegitimate government. News of the training exercise comes just days after the anniversary of the Capitol riot, and as the Justice Department announces the creation of a new domestic terrorism unit to tackle what officials said is an elevated threat from domestic violent extremists. Some question the close timing of the events, while others went further with fears that the Biden administration is preparing for American uprising. Biden's military war games fighting and killing American freedom fighters in guerrilla warfare, one Twitter user posted in reaction to news of the guerrilla warfare training on U.S. soil. Another Twitter user even questioned if the government was trying to get troops accustomed to the idea of killing fellow Americans. However, the guerrilla training exercise known as Robin Sage has actually been running every few months since the 1970s. In fact, we can jump back in time a year from Business Insider, how the Army's Robin Sage put Special Forces hopefuls to a final make-or-break test in the forests of North Carolina. This story starts picking up traction, and there's a challenge of how we title videos like this and how I present the information. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who say, you should just outright say it's debunked, but the goal with the video is to present something that people are like, I want to learn more about this. What is this? They see the story, and then we can break down the bigger context here. The Daily Mail did the same thing. I actually think it's important to do. It's the best way to do it. As people are posting on Twitter believing that this is some kind of new and unique exercise meant to harm Americans, it's important to say, here's the story, here's the greater context. Let's break this all down. I don't think, however, or I should say, even with that being the case, it's important to understand the greater context of what's happening in this country and why people are concerned about it. Look at this. One person said, looks like the front lines have changed, practicing for a war that could happen in the next 36 months. Chaos of 2022 will lead to 2024, or is it just another July? One said, obviously practice for civil war or domestic warfare. I want to make sure as many people as possible see this video and realize Robin Sage, the operation in question, has been going on for a long time. I do not believe this is in any way related to what's going on right now politically. They're just training Green Berets, special forces, in how to deal with illegitimate governments. Again, a year ago, the same thing. And nobody was complaining or freaking out back then. And they have these photographs of these men in training from 2019, which is what I found to be like the funniest thing ever. When they post these articles and everyone sees it and thinks this is like, oh no, Joe Biden's getting ready for civil war. I'm like, where do you think these photos came from? They've been doing this for a long time. Now, that being said, The training may actually prove to, whether intentionally or not, benefit special forces in the event of an actual civil war. The bigger question is, which side do you think these people would be on? I don't know. I don't know what the sides are for the most part. There's left, right, there's narrative, there's anti-establishment, whatever you want to call it. But wouldn't the military be more likely to be, I don't know, pro-Constitution, right-wing and not left-wing? Honestly, I don't know. But let me show you what happens when you Google search the idea of a civil war. How is it that a training exercise that goes on every few months since the 1970s could turn into this big viral story about special forces preparing for civil war? It's because people genuinely believe and fear there is a possibility of a civil war. They fear that there is a civil war coming, that we're in one. In my personal opinion, we are in a cold civil war. We got swatted. Timcast IRL got swatted. We have been under cyber attack consistently now. The show got knocked off the air with Mike Rowe. We were placed under a DDoS. Now, nobody's hurt by that, but it is an attempt to knock our show off the air. It is an attack. It is, in a sense, a kind of vandalism, causing economic damage to us, to our operation, to the information we would provide. This is the information aspect of a cold civil war, or just a civil war, whatever you want to call it. Someone used what appears to be a global botnet to take down our gigabit line. That to me was shocking. To be hit with a DDoS that knocked out gigabit internet, I'm impressed. That ain't nothing. But it happened. And now we have to spend a ton of money and redouble our efforts because we already have fail-safes and security. We've got to spend even more to hire more physical security after the swatting. These are attacks on us. This is not just because people don't like me and they're trolling. This is overtly political. So something is happening. Take a look at this. Let me just roll through all these things. From the New York Times, are we really facing a second civil war? I believe it's Bettridge's laws of headlines, that if a headline asks a question, the answer is no. And then we have this. This is from the Boston Globe. Q&A with Barbara F. Walter, author of How Civil War Starts on the Prospect of Open Civil Conflict Breaking Out in the U.S. Here we have the Daily Advance, Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Are we nearing civil war? Our people versus my people? I love this one. The New Yorker, a new civil war in America, followed by The New Yorker again. Is a civil war ahead? Then we have this from Independent Tribune. Civil war, our people versus my people. Oh, so this looks like the same article as the other one. NPR. Imagine another American civil war, but this time in every state. Then we have the Chicago Tribune. Another civil war? Sounds far-fetched until it isn't. Wow. All of those articles asking the same questions. Why? Well, maybe they're trying to invoke January 6th. Maybe they're trying to freak you out. Man, a couple of years ago, last year, when I had said it felt like we were entering a civil war, that people had said that there is a cold civil war happening, people on the left mocked the idea. They said I was dumb. They said I was a sensationalist. Now it is the establishment mainstream press saying, are we really heading for a civil war? Maybe it'll be a national divorce. I don't think so. I really don't. We had a fascinating conversation with Mike Rowe. Awesome guy. Seriously. Dirty Jobs. You know him, right? He talks about personal responsibility, all that good stuff. Check out the segment at timcast.com. It's just from, the other day. Become a member. Check out the Mike Rowe episode. Now, we mostly talk about dirty jobs and the dirty jobs he did with animals. But in the end, we get into the prospect of civil war because he asks, what do you normally talk about? And I jokingly, I'm like, civil war. He made an interesting point, a really good point. And he said, I wished we talked about this on the main show. If there is a national divorce, as many people have discussed, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, brought up the subject, and then everyone claimed that she was calling for it. In fact, on our show, she was like, no, that would be terrible. It's my kids who would lose their lives or risk their lives in this. Something interesting came up. Luke Rutkowski, he's on IRL frequently as basically a co-host over the past several months, seasonally, because he leaves and goes to Florida. And he mentioned peaceful divorce. The country breaking apart. Michael Malice has as well. And many people have said, what if the red states and the blue states just leave each other? What do you think happens to our energy? What do you think happens to our nuclear weapons? Mike Rowe said, if there was a national divorce, and the parents split amicably, who gets the kids? And by kids, I mean nuclear weapons or thermonuclear weapons. I love saying this factoid. Modern nuclear weapons, at least the ones we know of, are 1,250 times more powerful than the bombs we dropped in World War II, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. One multiple independently targeting re-entry vehicle, or MIRV, could drop 8 to 12 nuclear warheads after the ICBM launches into the stratosphere and then launches those warheads, and they pepper, just say, the eastern seaboard. Could hit how many cities? So, in the event of a national divorce, do you think that Illinois and New York and California are going to be like, well, there's a lot of nuclear weapons in those states, we're going to leave them there? Or do you think they're going to say, we want them? When there's strategic stockpile of nukes in key areas and one side is going to get more, do you think the other side just says, okay? Do you think factions that cannot agree will simply be like, well, we here in the red state are going to give you a bunch of our nukes? Oh, I don't know, man. Not to mention a lot of nukes are positioned globally. What happens to those? There is no peaceful divorce scenario. And maybe it doesn't happen. I hope it doesn't happen. The stupidest thing in the world are the people who are like, Tim wants it to happen. Simply because I'm telling you that everyone is talking about it. You know, it's fascinating. I've long been told that I have the unfortunate privilege of being ahead of the market. I was told that by a bunch of news organizations in the early 2010s because the work I was doing was well beyond what they could do. We're, doing this interactive and authentic style of news on the ground. They said, we can't even get to that point yet. You're ahead of the market. So nobody wants to pay for it because they can't do it yet, but you can. So good luck. Well, hey, it worked out, I guess. We're starting a news organization and we're the future. I don't know. Eventually, some young upstart will come up with an idea that supplants us. And that's just the way things go, right? Or maybe I'll just consistently be ahead of the market for whatever reason. I was the one saying early on I felt a civil war was coming. But I didn't come up with the idea. It was a Princeton professor who said cold civil war. It was, I think, in the Atlantic. And I bring it up all the time. I didn't just make this up. I'm not a psychic. I'm just reading the news. We have this story from 2020 I'd like to bring up. It's very important. A bipartisan group secretly gathered to game out a contested Trump-Biden election. The important word in this is secede. They say, Trump's ought to do blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, Biden's team sought to encourage large Western states to secede unless pro-democracy reforms were made. That scenario seemed highly far-fetched, but it envisioned a situation in which both sides may have incentives to contest the election. In an article from the Washington Post, they say, for obvious reasons, we couldn't ask Trump or Biden or their campaign aides to play themselves in these exercises. On the GOP side, we had, Republican National Committee individuals. On the Democratic side, participants included John Podesta, chair of Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, and a top White House advisor to Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Donna Brazile. Many other articles got into greater detail, but they didn't always encompass the bigger picture. I don't know if the Washington Post actually... Here we go. This is the important part. In the Trump win scenario, desperate Democrats, stunned by yet another election won by the candidate with fewer votes after credible claims of foreign interference and voter suppression, sought to send rival slates of electors to Congress. They even floated the idea of encouraging secessionist movements in California and the Pacific Northwest unless GOP congressional leaders agreed to a series of reforms, including the division of California into 5 smaller states to ensure better Senate representation of its vast population and statehood for DC and Puerto Rico. Maybe it's hyperbole. Maybe they never really would do this, but this is John Podesta and Donna Brazile saying they would encourage, or the Democrats would, a secessionist movement. Well, what ended up happening? Joe Biden wins. And now all of a sudden, those scenarios are out the window. I don't care if you are on the left or the right. I don't care if you think the Trump side was bad or whatever. What matters is the divide exists. That's it. Let me show you this story real quick. DOJ unveils new domestic terror unit as U.S. faces persistent and evolving threat a year after January 6. In this tweet thread from Glenn Greenwald, he mentions for those celebrating the DOJ's new creation of domestic terror units and all the new resources that will accompany it, here's the Department of Homeland Security's list of who they regard as violent domestic extremists. And it includes animal rights and environmental activists, abortion-related extremists, anti-government, anti-authority. It is not going to be good for anyone. The divide exists, and this is where it gets absolutely fascinating. From the Daily Beast, Maddow unearths 5 fake state documents declaring Trump victory in 2020 election. How do you solve for this? Rachel Maddow. I think she's pure evil because, I think she's evil. She's a very, very evil person. It's crazy. There are people on the left who think I'm evil, and they say Tim Pool lies or whatever. But in reality, these people believe the ends justify the means. They don't think I'm lying. They think it's just bad that I'm telling people the truth, so they'll call it a lie. And this is what people need to understand about the divide. I do not believe the ends justify the means because we never meet the ends. People on the left believe the ends do justify the means, even though you never meet the ends. You know what I mean by that is that our system is always evolving and changing. We're always growing and emerging within the system. If we tolerate fascism, authoritarianism, or fascistic ideologies, you will live in them forever. So I'd prefer to say liberty, right? People like Rachel Maddow and her followers would view you or I, namely me for doing the show, as evil because I'm informing people of the truth. That allows them to empower themselves and defy the establishment. On the left, I'll give you a really good example of this. Vaccine mandates. Do they work? The logical and objective answer is no. At least from our perspective. Why? Well, the goal of the vaccines is to stop the spread, right? That's what they said. That's what Biden said. Well, it's not really doing that, is it? And they say that, well, at least the vaccine reduces the severity of symptoms and the likelihood of hospitalization. Okay, well, that seems to be the case for now. In my opinion, a vaccine mandate would work if it stopped the spread of the virus. In New York, the virus people are contracting COVID at record numbers. But the left still keeps saying the vaccines work. The vaccine mandates work. Because what they're saying is the mandate works because people get vaccinated. They don't care what happens next. The goal to people like Rachel Maddow and her followers of a vaccine mandate is to force you to comply with the authority, regardless of what that compliance gets you. Wow. To me, I thought the goal of the vaccine mandate was to stop the spread of COVID and to save lives. But if they're claiming that the vaccine mandates work with record high cases and high hospitalizations, then the only real goal of the mandate was to force you to comply with authority. That's why I think they're evil. Because I think you should be informed of the truth. You should know what these 5 fake state documents really are. Now, of course, it's not just Rachel Maddow. Here's Rolling Stone. Swing state Trumpers forged electoral letters in harebrained scheme to overturn Biden's win. I don't care if you're on the left or the right. I don't care if you agree or disagree. The most important point that I think everyone must recognize is that the story exists. If you're on the left, you think Trump's harebrained scheme tried to overturn Biden's win. If you're on the right, you recognize what this was. The same thing that happened in Hawaii, that the rival group of electors drafted their document, sent it in, and hoped that in the event of a contested election, their choice would be read and certified. That's it. But on the left, the establishment just wants to treat you like a mushroom, keep you in the dark and feed you crap. That's how they do it. To them, it's justified because it's for the greater good. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It matters that everyone does what must be done. The vaccine mandate ensures that you all get vaccinated. But we don't care what the vaccine does after the fact. It's just to force you to do it. Well, my worldview is based upon solutions. If we were trying to build a house and everyone said, I don't care what the point is, everyone should just hammer nails. And I'd be like, well, I think you should hammer the nails if it's actually building the house. What do you think would work out? Which path works out? A bunch of random people banging nails into random objects, or me saying only hit the nail if it actually is going to contribute to the construction of the house? You get the point? Their authoritarianism leads nowhere, and they would criticize me? So my point is, there is no amicable return. There is no unity. I will not agree to live in that insane, harebrained way, as they call it. So here's the story, right? the documents, the forged documents. Here's Rachel Maddow saying, look at these documents. And they look really very, very similar. The amazing thing is that she does this thing where she goes, take a look at these documents and see if you notice anything. Here's the document from Michigan, the real one, and the forgery, the fake forgery, she calls it, on the left. Notice anything about these documents? No. What are you talking about? She's trying to assert that because they're all similar and use the same language, that proves, well, she doesn't actually say this, but is the implication then that there was a national level Trump scheme? The documents are just based off of two of the states. They're made to look like, let me see if I can get to the states. We have two states that have these documents, and then 5 states created electoral documents that looked very similar to them. That's it. It was a template. It was like somebody went online and found a template for a document and then drafted it up. Was it a harebrained scheme? Yeah, maybe, I guess. Are they forgeries? No. The Republican electors were not certified and duly elected, but they still drafted their documents because they believed that after a legal challenge, it would be deemed that they were the true electors, and thus they needed to get this done before safe harbor provisions. I bring you back, my friends, to 1960. All right, this is the 1960 presidential election between Kennedy and Nixon. And we can go down and let me just search. Okay, I don't want to look at a picture of that guy. I just want to search for Hawaii. We search for Hawaii and we can see they write. In Hawaii, it appeared as though Nixon had won. It was actually called for him early Wednesday morning. Governor William Quinn certified the Republican electors, and they cast Hawaii's 3 electoral votes for Nixon. When the election was challenged in court, the Democratic electors cast 3 electoral votes for President-elect John F. Kennedy, but cast them later than the safe harbor deadline. Whoa, 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 whoa. So these forgeries from a Democratic harebrained scheme. The certification for the Democratic votes was issued when a recount completed before Christmas resulted in Kennedy being declared the winner by 115 votes. Before there was even a recount, even though the Republicans were already certified, the Democrats cast electoral votes. Is that a forgery? No. It was because they were expecting the results of the court case to favor them, and it did. In fact, Nixon, who was the president of the Senate at the time, had the opportunity to reject them, but chose not to, even though they came later than the safe harbor deadline. He didn't need to do that. So where are we today? Today we get the likes of Rachel Maddow in this just very, man, is it evil, mockery act. This is a woman who has lied relentlessly for years about everything, who nearly cried when it turned out Trump didn't collude with Russia. And she does this thing where she's like, take a look at these documents. Take a look at them. Do you notice something? I'm just like, wow. This is just evil. It's just evil. I want you to live your life and be free. I don't want to be your boss. I don't want to be in charge of you. And the people on the left, many of them think that's evil because you are too stupid to live your life. Because if you do live your life, you'll keep pooping in your own water like the chickens do. And truth be told, that's a scary reality, but it isn't wrong. People keep polluting and destroying, and they don't care. They don't believe it. I certainly think that's a problem, but I'm not here to be your boss or be in charge of you or tell you how to live your life. I'm just here to tell you what's going on, what I think, how I feel about things, my opinions, and the facts, and then you can decide for yourself how you should live. On the left, they don't do that. They say the government should mandate you get the vaccine, so you get the vaccine regardless of the outcome. That's insane to me. It's like telling people, like, everybody should go do... I didn't make the analogy. You get the point. I think it's absolutely insane that the goal of the mandates is just to make you suffer, to force you to bend the knee to the machine because they want you to live the way they think you should live. Here's an example. Michael Bloomberg wants to tax sugary drinks because you're too stupid to not drink them. Well, you know what? People shouldn't drink sugary drinks. I stopped. But people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Bloomberg should not be your boss, your dad telling you how to live, or your mom. But that's the world that these people want. And they will achieve it by lying to you. I disagree with that. I think it's wrong. So the reason I bring this up is that it feels like we are headed towards a collision where people who believe in freedom for the individual and people who believe in adherence to the authority are not going to get along. The left is overwhelmingly fascistic. It's a fact. When they say vaccine mandates work, how do they work? They force people to get vaccinated and the rates go up. And then you have record-breaking cases in New York. Sounds like your mandate didn't stop that. Well, they don't care about that. They don't. They just want you on your knees. Don't. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And there are very serious challenges with a libertarian ideology. Little L, not big. What if we are destroying the planet? I think we are. I think population density is the main problem, but I do think that it's a reality of overpopulation. People need to get away from cities, find some personal responsibility. We also have a problem in that humanity is becoming overwhelmingly weak. Morbidly obese individuals who are like, the world should change for me. MRI machine should be bigger. Yeah, that to me is nuts. We need personal responsibility. But there are people who just are soft as cookie dough, who don't want to do the work and don't want to take responsibility. They just want you to do as you're told and shut your mouth. I won't. So that leads me to believe that the only logical outcome, civil war. Are you ever going to, I'll put it this way, man. Joe Biden wants vaccine mandates nationwide for federal employees, and it's at the Supreme Court. Are you going to say, okay, inject me? Are you? Look, a lot of people did. A lot of people will. A lot of people won't. Some people have already said, over my dead body. For some people, it's not an issue of the vaccines. I don't care if you've got the vaccine or you don't want to get it. It's between you and your doctor. It's whatever. There's a ton of medications I've taken throughout my life. I don't even know what they do or what they are. I trust the doc, right? The issue, though, is if someone walks up to me and says, I am going to stick you with this, I say the same thing, over my dead body. I won't allow it. So masks are one thing, but DC, Philly, Chicago, LA, New York, Cook County, not just Chicago, Cook County, the second largest county in the country, mandating you be injected, whether you want it or not. How many of you are going to be like, okay, that's fine by me. I guess I don't need to live in this country. Or are you going to be like, no, I have a right to public accommodation? How many of you are going to say no to those mandates? A lot of people. And that's what makes me think, we're headed down a dangerous path that leads to conflict. Because the moment you go to one of these red states and try and start forcing people to get vaccinated, it's going to get bad. It's going to get ugly. I don't know how we navigate out of this unless Democrats stop. Maybe the solution right now is go vote. I mean it, seriously. Go vote in your primaries. Any Democrat who is in favor of mandates, any Republican, every single one, even in West Virginia, we had mask mandates earlier this year. Get rid of all of them. Manchin out. Every single one of these incumbents, Republican or otherwise, vote them out. Kim Iverson, center-left individuals such as voting Republican straight ticket to end the mandates. I hear you. Maybe that's what we got to do. I don't know if Republicans will save you, but get in that primary. I'll leave it here. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. tonight at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all then.